Tonight, we embark on an extended, immersive exploration of a quintessential mid-century American experience. The cross-country road trip, specifically as it would have been navigated, endured, and occasionally cherished around the year 1962. This journey, undertaken in an era prior to the pervasive completion of the interstate highway system as a comprehensive national network, and notably devoid of the now ubiquitous digital aids such as global positioning system navigation and cellular telephones, presented a unique and often formidable array of challenges alongside its distinct rewards. Successfully completing such an expedition required not only a mechanically sound, or at least persistently coaxable, automobile, but also considerable foresight in planning, unwavering resourcefulness in the face of the unexpected, a deep well of patience, and a capacity for navigating the often unpredictable and sparsely documented byways of the nation. Our focus this evening will be on the practical realities, the everyday minutiae, the forgotten social norms, and the subtle psychological undercurrents that collectively define these ambitious vehicular adventures, endeavors that shaped a generation's understanding of their country and their own resilience. The decision to undertake a cross-country road trip in 1962 was often born from a confluence of societal and personal factors. The post-World War II economic boom, for many American families, translated into greater disposable income, more widely available leisure time solidified by emerging labor standards, and an optimistic outlook on the future. This period also saw the widespread availability of increasingly reliable and comfortable automobiles, mass-produced and marketed as symbols of freedom, personal achievement, and the modern American lifestyle. The car was not merely a utility, it was an extension of the family's identity, a mobile haven from which to witness the grandeur of the nation. The American landscape itself, vast, geographically diverse, and mythologized in popular culture, beckoned exploration. National parks, newly established or long revered, burgeoning theme parks like Disneyland, which had opened in 1955, historically significant sites, and the simple, yet profound, allure of seeing distant states and experiencing regional cultures fueled these ambitious journeys. For many, it was a rite of passage, a way to educate children about their country, or a means to visit far-flung relatives in an age before affordable air travel became commonplace for the average family. The planning phase of a 1962 road trip was an endeavor in itself, an analog art form requiring foresight and diligence. The cornerstone of this process was, unequivocally, the paper map. Major oil companies such as Esso, later Exxon, Texaco, Gulf, Mobil, Shell, Phillips 66, and Sinclair distributed these maps widely, often free of charge as a promotional item, at their thousands of service stations dotting the nation's highways and byways. These were not mere schematic diagrams, but detailed cartographic documents, usually state-specific, showcasing major U.S. highways, significant state routes, county lines, topographical features like mountain ranges and rivers, principal towns and cities, and often highlighting designated points of interest, state parks, and historical markers. Families would typically accumulate a collection of these maps, perhaps supplemented by comprehensive road atlases like those published by Rand McNally. The ritual of spreading these large, colorful sheets across a dining room table or living room floor, often involving the entire family, was a common prelude to any significant trip. Routes were meticulously traced with a finger or a soft pencil, with parents debating the merits of different U.S. highways. U.S. Route 66, stretching from Chicago to Santa Monica, being the most iconic and romanticized, but many other transcontinental or major regional routes like U.S. 1 along the East Coast, U.S. 30, the Lincoln Highway, U.S. 40, the National Road, or U.S. 80 across the South served as vital arteries. Considerations in route selection included the perceived scenic value, the presence of specific attractions or natural wonders, the locations of friends or relatives who might offer a welcome respite in the form of lodging and a home-cooked meal, and any known road construction projects or seasonal detours. Information for which was often gleaned from travel club publications, anecdotal accounts from previous travelers, or sometimes notes provided by the oil company map services themselves. The American Automobile Association, or AAA, played a significant role for its burgeoning membership. Beyond its emergency roadside assistance, AAA offered a highly valued trip planning service. Members could request triptychs, which were essentially customized, spiral-bound booklets of strip maps. A member would inform their local AAA office of their intended starting point, final destination, and perhaps some desired intermediate stops or regions to traverse. AAA cartographers would then meticulously highlight the recommended route on a series of map segments, often adding handwritten annotations regarding specific road conditions, mileage between key points, recommended restaurants or AAA-approved motels, speed traps, or areas known for challenging driving. These triptychs, with their turn-by-turn guidance, provided a significant sense of security and curated expertise in an era where reliable, consolidated travel information was otherwise scarce. Beyond the critical task of route planning, vehicle preparation was an absolute necessity, as automotive reliability in 1962, while improving, was not at the level of modern vehicles. Mechanical failures were not an abstract possibility, but a relatively common occurrence that prudent travelers anticipated. A thorough pre-trip inspection was standard practice. This involved checking engine oil levels and condition, radiator coolant antifreeze levels and mixture, especially if traveling to areas with extreme temperatures, battery charge and terminal connections, tire pressure and tread where bias-ply tires, the standard of the day, were more susceptible to punctures, sidewall damage, and faster wear than modern radial tires. Fan belts, often the Achilles heel of older engines, were inspected for cracks and proper tension, as were radiator hoses for signs of perishing. Brakes, typically drum brakes on all four wheels, required checking and adjustment. Many car owners, particularly fathers who had perhaps gained mechanical experience during wartime service or through agricultural backgrounds, possessed a degree of mechanical knowledge and would perform some of these checks and minor tune-ups themselves, such as changing spark plugs, adjusting ignition timing, or cleaning a carburetor. A well-stocked toolbox was often considered an essential piece of luggage, containing a set of open-ended wrenches, socket wrenches, various screwdrivers, Phillips and flathead, pliers including vice grips, a hammer, a jack capable of lifting the heavy vehicle, a sturdy lug wrench, spare fuses of various amperages, electrical tape, perhaps a can of aerosol starting fluid for reluctant engines in cold weather, and even a spare fan belt or radiator hose, as finding specific parts in remote areas could be challenging. The owner's manual for the particular make and model of the car was also indispensable, offering troubleshooting flowcharts, basic repair instructions, and lubrication charts. Some particularly cautious travelers might even carry a small supply of spare engine oil or brake fluid. Financial preparations involved ensuring an adequate supply of cash for daily expenses, and for larger sums or as a security measure, travelers' checks, predominantly from American Express. Credit cards, while existing in 1962, Diners Club being a prominent early example, with American Express and Carte Blanche also gaining traction, had limited acceptance. They were primarily useful at higher-end hotels, some restaurants in larger cities, and for airline tickets, but their utility at small, independent motels, rural gas stations, or local diners was highly uncertain. Therefore, carrying sufficient cash, carefully budgeted, was essential. Estimating fuel costs, which varied by state and region, food expenses for multiple people over many days, and nightly lodging costs for a multi-day or multi-week journey required careful calculation and often a contingency fund for unexpected repairs or delays. Some families maintained meticulous handwritten ledgers during the trip, tracking every expenditure to stay within budget. Once the meticulous preparations were complete and the car was laden, the journey itself began, and with it, the critical, ongoing task of navigation. The role of the navigator, typically the front seat passenger, often the mother in traditional family units of the era, was paramount and demanding. This was not a passive role, but an active, continuous process of interpreting the map and correlating it with the physical environment. The navigator was responsible for constantly monitoring the map, cross-referencing it with road signs, mileage markers, which were not always consistently placed or accurate. And vehicle odometers themselves were mechanical and could have cumulative errors. And discernible landmarks such as rivers, railroad crossings, distinctive mountain peaks, water towers, or even uniquely named businesses that might be indicated on more detailed local maps or remembered from previous journeys. Road signs in 1962 were not standardized to the degree they are today under the manual on uniform traffic control devices. While U.S. highway markers, the distinctive white shield with black numbering, were relatively consistent across states, the design, placement, and condition of state highway markers, county road signs, and local street name signs could vary significantly. Signs might be small, made of painted wood or embossed metal, sometimes faded by sun and weather, obscured by overgrown vegetation, or simply missing altogether, particularly on less traveled rural routes or older sections of highway that had been bypassed by newer alignments. A common and often frustrating navigational challenge was determining the correct route through unfamiliar towns and cities. U.S. highways, being the primary long-distance routes before the full development of the interstate system, frequently passed directly through the main commercial streets of small towns and the bustling, often congested, downtown cores of larger cities. Navigating these urban areas required intense concentration from both the driver and navigator, with careful attention paid to often confusing arrays of street name signs, route markers that might be intermittently placed or compete with a plethora of commercial signage, and local traffic signals that could disrupt the flow. A missed turn in a city, easily done amidst heavy traffic or unclear signage, could lead to considerable disorientation and significant lost time, as rejoining the intended route often involved navigating a grid of unfamiliar streets without the benefit of a recalculating route prompt from a digital assistant. It meant pulling over to a safe spot, unfolding the often unwieldy map again, and carefully attempting to reorient oneself based on surrounding street names or visible landmarks. Some larger cities provided marked bypass routes designed to skirt the densest downtown areas, but these were not always clearly signed, consistently maintained, or necessarily much faster than traversing the city center. Night driving presented an entirely different set of navigational hurdles. Landmarks that were easily recognizable in daylight became obscured or invisible. Road signs, unless well illuminated, which was rare outside of urban areas, could be incredibly difficult to read in the relatively dim glow of 1960s sealed beam headlights. The navigator had to rely more heavily on mileage readings from the car's odometer, the sequence of towns as they appeared on the map, and the distinctive patterns of light from approaching settlements. A reliable flashlight, preferably with fresh batteries, was an essential tool for reading the map in the darkened car interior. though its use had to be managed carefully to avoid creating glare that could distract the driver or impair their night vision. The ambient darkness of rural America in 1962 was also more profound than today, with less light pollution from sprawling development, making unlit roads feel particularly isolated. The interstate highway system, authorized by the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956, was envisioned as a transformative network of high-speed, limited-access, controlled-access highways designed for efficient long-distance travel and national defense. By 1962, significant portions of this system were complete or actively under construction across the country. Travelers would often encounter these new stretches of smooth, multi-lane concrete or asphalt, experiencing the novel sensation of cruising at sustained higher speeds, often 65 to 70 mph where posted, without the interruptions of stoplights, cross-traffic, or direct access from abutting properties. These segments felt truly futuristic compared to the older roads. However, the interstate system was far from a continuous coast-to-coast network at this point. It existed in segments, often bypassing larger cities or connecting major urban centers within a state. This meant that a long-distance road trip in 1962 would invariably involve a patchwork of travel experiences. Periods of swift progress on a new interstate, followed by a diversion back onto an older U.S. highway or state route as the interstate segment abruptly ended, often with minimal transition signage. Drivers and navigators had to be adept at constantly transitioning between these different types of roadways, each with its own unique characteristics, speed limits, and navigational demands. This constant shifting required vigilance and an ability to adapt driving style and navigational strategy accordingly. The automobile itself, the central figure in this mobile drama, was a product of its time. The cars of 1962 were, by contemporary standards, impressively large, heavy, and often extravagantly styled with prominent chrome grilles, sweeping body lines, and the ubiquitous tail fins that had characterized late 1950s design, though these were beginning to be toned down by 62. Popular family cars included the Chevrolet Impala and Bel Air, the Ford Fairlane and Galaxy, the Plymouth Fury and Belvedere, and a wide variety of station wagons from all major American manufacturers: Ford Country Squire, Chevrolet Nomad or Parkwood, Plymouth Suburban, which offered expansive cargo space and often a rear-facing third seat that was a novelty for children. These vehicles typically featured large displacement V8 engines, which provided ample horsepower and torque for cruising at highway speeds and hauling heavy loads. But they were not particularly fuel efficient, with gasoline mileage often languishing in the low to mid-teens, sometimes even single digits for the largest engines or when towing a travel trailer. Manual transmissions, typically 3-speed column-shifted, 3 on the tree, were still common, though automatic transmissions were rapidly gaining popularity and were a desirable option for long-distance touring. Power steering and power brakes were becoming more widely available, especially on mid-range and higher-end models, significantly easing the effort of maneuvering these heavy vehicles, but were not yet standard equipment across all lines. Air conditioning, a true luxury item, was relatively rare and expensive, typically found only on premium models or as a costly aftermarket installation. Most families relied on what was humorously termed 4 to 60 air conditioning, all 4 windows rolled down, while traveling at 60 miles per hour. This, of course, invited wind, noise, dust, and insects into the car, but was the prevailing method of ventilation. Mechanical reliability, while generally improving year by year, remained a persistent concern for long-distance travelers. Overheating was a frequent issue, especially for cars heavily laden with passengers and luggage, laboring up long mountain grades in the summer heat, or idling in slow-moving city traffic. Drivers learned to monitor the dashboard temperature gauge closely. If so equipped, some cars had only a warning light and might pull over to the roadside to allow the engine to cool if it started to climb into the danger zone. This often involved opening the hood to allow heat to dissipate, a common sight along highways in mountainous regions. Vapor lock, a condition where gasoline vaporized in the fuel lines due to excessive heat from the engine or ambient temperature, could cause the engine to sputter and stall, requiring a cool-down period before it could be restarted. Flat tires were a more common occurrence than today, due to the construction of bias-ply tires, which were more vulnerable to punctures and sidewall damage, and the varied condition of some road surfaces, particularly unpaved or poorly maintained secondary roads. Every driver, and often older children, was expected to know how to change a tire, a physically demanding process involving locating the spare tire, often mounted in the trunk or under the vehicle. The jack, typically a simple, manually operated scissor or bumper jack, and a lug wrench. Roadside tire changes, sometimes in inclement weather or on narrow shoulders, were a memorable, if unwelcome, part of the road trip experience for many families. Service stations, then, were far more than just places to refuel. They were vital oases of support for the motorist. Attendants, often clad in uniforms bearing the oil company's logo, would not only pump the leaded gasoline, either regular or higher-octane premium or ethyl was the norm, dispensed from visible register pumps or later, clock-face pumps, but also routinely check the engine oil level with a dipstick, clean the front and rear windshields with a squeegee and a spray bottle of cleaning solution, and sometimes even offer to check tire pressure. These services were provided courteously and efficiently, often accompanied by a friendly chat about road conditions or local points of interest. These stations were also crucial sources of local information, reliable directions, and frequently the only public restroom available for many miles, access sometimes requiring a key obtained from the attendant, a measure to maintain cleanliness. Major oil brands like Standard Oil, with its various regional identities like Sohio, Esso, Humble, Shell, Texaco with its iconic Big T star, Phillips 66, Sinclair with its green dinosaur mascot, and City's Service, Citgo were ubiquitous, each with its own distinctive station architecture, signage, and color schemes, creating a familiar, if intensely competitive, landscape across the nation. These stations often had one or two service bays where minor repairs, tire changes, or lubrication services could be performed by on-duty mechanics. The interior of the car transformed into the family's mobile living space for hours, sometimes days on end. Bench seats were common, both in the front and rear, typically covered in durable but often non-breathable vinyl or a combination of vinyl and patterned fabric. These vinyl seats could become uncomfortably hot and sticky in the summer sun, leading to the use of woven seat covers or beach towels for comfort. Seat belts were not yet mandatory in all states or standard factory equipment in all cars. If present, they were typically lap belts only, often an optional extra. The concept of integrated child safety seats, as we know them, did not exist. Infants might ride in a portable bassinet or car bed placed on the rear seat, and young children often roamed relatively freely in the back seat, lay down on the rear window ledge, or even stood on the transmission hump between the front seats to get a better view. Practices that would be unthinkable today from a safety perspective, but were commonplace then. The sheer amount of time spent in close proximity within the vehicle inevitably led to a unique family dynamic, a mixture of shared experience, inevitable squabbles, and moments of spontaneous fun. Sustenance and slumber on the road were daily concerns that shaped much of the rhythm and routine of a 1962 cross-country journey. Finding suitable food and lodging each day was an integral part of the adventure, often involving a degree of uncertainty and discovery. While some exceptionally meticulous planners might have pre-booked accommodations for their entire itinerary, particularly if traveling to highly popular national parks like Yellowstone or Yosemite during peak summer season, or to major tourist destinations like Disneyland, many families embraced a more spontaneous approach. This typically involved driving until late afternoon or early evening, when fatigue began to set in or when they reached a town that seemed promising, and then beginning the active search for a suitable motel for the night. The late afternoon would often see the navigator, map in hand, scanning the roadside for promising signs indicating lodging. The motel industry was in a period of rapid expansion and evolution. Chains like Holiday Inn, founded by Kemmons Wilson in 1952, were aggressively standardizing the roadside lodging experience. Holiday Inn pioneered many features that travelers came to expect, such as relatively consistent room size and layout, private bathrooms with hot and cold running water, in-room televisions, black and white of course, telephones, individually controlled air conditioning, a significant draw, free ice machines, and often an on-site restaurant and a swimming pool, the latter being a particularly strong attraction for families with children after a long, hot day confined in the car. Their large, distinctive green and yellow, great sign, a towering neon beacon, became a familiar and reassuring landmark for weary travelers, promising a certain level of quality and predictability under the slogan, "The Nation's Innkeeper." Other emerging chains like Howard Johnson's Motor Lodges, often co-located with their restaurants, Ramada Inns, and Best Western, which was more of a referral network of independent motels adhering to certain standards, also contributed to this trend of standardization. However, alongside these burgeoning chains, a vast number of independent, often family-owned and operated, motels, frequently called motor courts or tourist courts, still flourished along America's highways. These establishments typically featured a series of rooms or individual detached or semi-detached cabins, arranged in a U-shape or L-shape around a central parking area or courtyard, allowing guests the convenience of parking their car directly in front of their unit. The architecture could range from simple, utilitarian cinder block structures to more charmingly rustic log cabins or themed designs reflecting local character. The quality, cleanliness, and amenities of these independent motels varied enormously. Some were meticulously maintained and offered genuine hospitality, while others could be quite basic or even run down. Neon signs were a prominent and often elaborate feature of the roadside landscape, employing vibrant colors and flashing animations to advertise vacancy, heated, air-cooled, a less effective precursor to true air conditioning. Often just a fan pulling air over a wet filter, TV, free TV, kitchenettes, small cooking facilities within the room, or rates $4 up. The dreaded no vacancy sign, especially encountered late at night or during a rainstorm in an unfamiliar town, could induce a palpable sense of anxiety, prompting a continued, often bleary-eyed, drive to the next town or a less desirable lodging choice. Checking into a motel involved registering at a small front office, often attached to the owner's living quarters, receiving a physical key, no key cards, and perhaps getting a recommendation for a local place to eat. Dining on the road offered its own spectrum of experiences, from carefully packed homemade meals to the emerging culture of roadside restaurants. Diners were quintessential fixtures of the American roadside landscape, often housed in gleaming, streamlined, prefabricated structures reminiscent of railroad cars, with long counters, vinyl-topped swivel stools, cozy booths, and tabletop jukebox selectors. They served classic American comfort food, usually prepared quickly and affordably. Hamburgers, cheeseburgers, often with grilled onions, hot dogs, French fries, sometimes hand-cut, thick milkshakes made with real ice cream, club sandwiches, open-faced hot turkey or roast beef sandwiches smothered in gravy, hearty meatloaf platters, fried chicken, and generous slices of homemade-style pie, apple, cherry, lemon meringue being perennial favorites. Waitresses, often with a no-nonsense but friendly and efficient demeanor, kept the coffee cups perpetually full and might address regular customers or even friendly strangers as hun or dear. Howard Johnson's restaurants, easily recognizable by their distinctive bright orange roofs and blue-green cupolas, offered a more standardized and family-oriented dining experience with a consistent menu across their extensive national chain. They were particularly famous for their 28 flavors of ice cream, fried clams, and frankfurts served in toasted, buttered rolls. For many families traveling with children, the predictability of a Howard Johnson's was a welcome relief. Many families, however, opted for picnicking as a primary means of sustenance on the road, both to save considerable money and to enjoy meals in a more relaxed, outdoor setting. A large metal or styrofoam cooler, perhaps a classic Coleman model, would be a standard piece of road trip equipment, diligently packed each morning. Typical contents included sandwiches, often peanut butter and jelly for the children, and perhaps bologna and cheese or tuna salad for the adults, all made on soft white bread. Hard-boiled eggs, bags of potato chips, celery and carrot sticks, fresh fruit like apples or bananas, and cookies or other homemade baked goods were common accompaniments. A large thermos would hold cold Kool-Aid, lemonade, or iced tea, while another might contain hot coffee for the adults. Roadside picnic tables, often located in small, shaded, state-maintained rest areas or scenic spots within national or state parks, provided convenient, if basic, dining facilities. These breaks offered a crucial opportunity for everyone to stretch their legs, for children to run around and burn off pent-up energy, and for the family to escape the confines of the car for a while. Gas station convenience stores, as we recognize them today with their extensive aisles of groceries, prepared foods, and diverse beverage options, were not yet a common feature of the American roadside. Gas stations in 1962 primarily focused on selling gasoline, motor oil, and a limited selection of tires, batteries, spark plugs, and other automotive accessories. Snack and drink options were usually quite limited, often consisting of a coin-operated vending machine for chilled soft drinks in classic glass bottles that required a bottle opener, often attached to the machine by a chain, and perhaps a small countertop display of popular candy bars, Hershey's, Snickers, Baby Ruth, chewing gum, Lifesavers, and bags of potato chips or peanuts. Finding a wider variety of groceries or specific food items often necessitated locating a proper grocery store in a nearby town. The long hours spent confined within the moving vehicle, particularly for children, required a repertoire of strategies for alleviating boredom and maintaining a semblance of peace. With no personal electronic devices, no streaming video, and no handheld games, entertainment was largely analog, interactive, and often self-generated. Car games were a staple of family road trips. I Spy with My Little Eye was a perennial favorite, encouraging observation of the passing scenery. The license plate game involved spotting license plates from different states, with the goal of collecting as many unique states as possible during the journey. Some families kept meticulous lists, 20 questions, or animal, vegetable, mineral, tested deductive reasoning. Alphabet games involved finding letters of the alphabet in sequence on road signs or billboards. Singing songs together was another popular pastime, ranging from current popular radio hits learned by ear, to classic campfire songs, folk songs, children's ditties like Row, Row, Row Your Boat, or 99 bottles of beer on the wall, though perhaps a modified, child-friendly version. Comic books Superman, Batman, Archie, Richie Rich, Disney characters were common travel companions for children, as were magazines like Mad Magazine for older kids, or perhaps a few cherished paperback novels for teens and adults. The car radio was a constant, if sometimes fickle, source of entertainment and information. AM radio was the dominant broadcast band. During daylight hours, local stations offered a mix of popular music, which in 1962 included early rock and roll, doo-wop, surf music, country and western, and the smooth sounds of crooners like Frank Sinatra or Perry Como. News updates often delivered with a serious, authoritative tone, local weather forecasts, and agricultural reports in rural areas. The quality of reception could vary significantly, with signals often fading or being subject to interference. At night, however, the nature of AM radio propagation changed, allowing powerful, clear-channel AM stations from distant major cities to be picked up, sometimes from hundreds or even thousands of miles away. This phenomenon, known as skywave or skip, provided a diverse and sometimes exotic listening experience. A family driving through the dark plains of Kansas might suddenly pick up a late-night jazz program from a station in Chicago, a country music jamboree broadcast from WSM in Nashville, home of the Grand Ole Opry, a talk show from New York, or a live broadcast of a Major League Baseball game from a distant city. The distinctive crackle and hiss of static as the signal waxed and waned, and the skill involved in carefully tuning the radio dial to lock onto these elusive transmissions were familiar parts of the nighttime driving experience. These distant voices provided a sense of connection to the wider world, a soundtrack to the dark miles. Roadside attractions, both natural and man-made, provided welcome breaks from the monotony of driving and opportunities for novel entertainment and education. These ranged from the awe-inspiring majesty of national parks like the Grand Canyon, Yellowstone with Old Faithful Geyser, Yosemite, or the Great Smoky Mountains, to sites of historical significance such as Civil War battlefields, colonial-era towns, or pioneer trails marked by historical societies. However, a significant and memorable part of the 1962 road trip landscape was the proliferation of decidedly kitschy and commercial roadside attractions. Entrepreneurs, recognizing the growing stream of automotive tourists with money to spend and time to fill, created a vibrant and often bizarre array of diversions designed to lure them off the highway. These included giant statues, Paul Bunyan and Babe the Blue Ox, towering dinosaurs, oversized fruits or animals, mystery spots that purported to defy the laws of gravity with tilted shacks and water flowing uphill, alligator farms, snake pits, reptile gardens, wax museums featuring historical figures or Hollywood stars, Indian trading posts selling Native American crafts of varying authenticity alongside mass-produced souvenirs, and rickety observation towers promising panoramic views of the surrounding countryside, often for a fee. Signs for these attractions would often begin appearing many miles in advance, dotting the roadside with a series of increasingly urgent, colorful, and often hand-painted billboards, building anticipation or sometimes family debate with slogans like "Only 50 miles to see the world's largest ball of twine," or "Don't miss Reptile Land." Live rattlesnake milking. These stops, while sometimes underwhelming or patently absurd, added to the unique fabric of the American road trip adventure, provided memorable photo opportunities for the family album, and generated countless anecdotes. Guidebooks like the AAA Tour Book or the Mobile Travel Guide, which rated establishments with a star system, might highlight some of the more reputable or significant attractions, but many were discovered simply by being observant of the roadside advertising or by word-of-mouth recommendation from other travelers encountered at motels or diners. In an era devoid of cellular phones, smartphones, or widespread internet access, Communication while on the road or with those back home was reliant on a limited set of analog technologies, primarily pay telephones and the United States Postal Service. Making a telephone call from the road meant locating a working public pay telephone. These were typically found inside or outside gas stations, in the lobbies of motels, at restaurants, or occasionally in standalone booths along sidewalks in towns. Using a payphone required a supply of coins, usually dimes for local calls, and often a considerable number of nickels, dimes, and quarters for long-distance calls, which were placed through a long-distance operator. The operator would ask for the number being called, the number from which the call was being made, often printed on the payphone itself, and would then calculate the charge for the initial period, typically 3 minutes, and inform the caller how much money to deposit. Additional minutes would require depositing more coins when prompted by the operator or a series of beeps. Calls were typically brief and focused, due to the expense and the public nature of the communication. Long queues could sometimes form for a popular payphone, especially in a busy tourist area. Sending postcards was a far more common and leisurely way to keep friends and family updated on the journey's progress and to share a glimpse of the sights being seen. These glossy, colorful cards, featuring idealized images of famous landmarks, motel exteriors, scenic vistas, or humorous local caricatures, would be purchased in abundance at souvenir shops, gas stations, or attractions. A brief message would be scribbled on the back: "Having a wonderful time, wish you were here. Weather is beautiful, saw the Grand Canyon today." An address added, a postage stamp affixed, a 4-cent stamp for a postcard in 1962, and the card would be dropped into a U.S. mailbox, arriving at its destination days or even weeks later, a tangible, if delayed, memento of the trip. Handling emergencies on the road, whether mechanical or medical, required a significant degree of self-reliance and often depended on the kindness of strangers or the availability of local services. For a serious medical issue, one would need to seek out the nearest town with a doctor's office or a hospital, relying on road signs, information gleaned from gas station attendants, or perhaps a listing in a local telephone directory found at a payphone. There was no 911 emergency number in widespread use. One would typically dial 0 for the operator and ask for assistance. For a vehicle breakdown, if a roadside repair by the driver was not possible, the options were limited. One common strategy was to wait for a passing motorist to stop and offer assistance, which might involve a ride to the nearest town, help with a repair, or simply going to a phone to summon aid. This practice, while carrying inherent risks, was more common and generally perceived as safer in that era. Alternatively, if near a town, one might walk to the nearest gas station or business with a telephone to call a local tow truck or garage. State police or highway patrol officers, if encountered, could also provide assistance or radio for help. There was no ubiquitous roadside assistance service that could be summoned with the push of a button on a mobile app. AAA members had a number to call for service, but this still required reaching a telephone and clearly describing one's location, which could be difficult on an unfamiliar rural road. Travelers often carried a basic first aid kit, emergency flares to warn other traffic in case of a nighttime breakdown, a warm blanket, and perhaps a jug of extra water, particularly if traveling through remote or desert areas. This prevailing sense of relative isolation, while potentially daunting in an emergency situation, also contributed significantly to the unique character of the 1962 road trip, fostering a spirit of adventure and profound independence. Families were, to a much greater extent than modern travelers, thrown back upon their own collective resources, ingenuity, and problem-solving skills. This often led to a strengthened family bond, as challenges were faced and overcome together. The very absence of constant digital connection and curated entertainment also meant a different kind of immersion in the journey itself. Without individual screens to distract each passenger, occupants of the car were more likely to engage with their surroundings and with each other. They observed the slowly changing landscapes, the subtle shifts in vegetation, architecture, and accents as they crossed state lines. They might read physical books or magazines, engage in sustained conversations, play collaborative car games, or simply allow their minds to wander and daydream while watching the endless ribbon of highway unfold or the rhythmic flick of telephone poles passing by. Boredom, a state almost anathema to modern sensibilities, was a common and accepted part of the experience, a void to be endured or actively overcome with imagination and internal resources, not instantly banished with a tap or a swipe on a screen. This could lead to more introspection, more direct and unmediated interaction among family members, and a deeper, more patient appreciation for the sheer scale and diversity of the American continent. The culmination of the journey, reaching the final intended destination after days or perhaps weeks on the road, invariably brought with it a profound sense of accomplishment and relief. The accumulated miles, the unforeseen challenges successfully navigated, the myriad sights witnessed, the diverse regional foods tasted, all contributed to a rich and indelible tapestry of memories. The family car, having faithfully served as transport, mobile dining room, impromptu entertainment center, and sometimes even a temporary sick bay, would be thoroughly unpacked, perhaps with a collective sigh of relief mixed with a touch of nostalgia for the unique adventure just concluded. Souvenirs collected meticulously along the route, colorful felt pennants from national parks or tourist towns, stacks of postcards, glossy brochures from attractions, perhaps some kitschy trinkets like miniature totem poles or snow globes, or even natural mementos like unusually shaped rocks from a national park, before such collection was widely discouraged, served as tangible reminders of the places visited and experiences had. These items often found prominent display in children's bedrooms or family living rooms. Photographs, captured on roll film cameras such as the popular and simple Kodak Brownie Starmite or Instamatic models, or more sophisticated 35 rangefinders or SLRs for dedicated hobbyists, were a precious and carefully curated record of the trip. The rolls of exposed film Kodak Kodachrome or Ektachrome for color slides, Kodacolor for color prints, or various black and white films like Tri-X, would be carefully packaged and mailed off for developing to a distant processing lab like Kodak, or taken to a local pharmacy or camera shop upon returning home. There would then follow a period of eager anticipation, often lasting a week or more, waiting for the process slides or prints to arrive. The subsequent family ritual of viewing these images for the first time, perhaps projected as slides onto a living room wall, or passed around as a stack of newly minted prints, was an event in itself, an opportunity to relive the journey, share stories, and solidify the memories. These photo albums and slide carousels became treasured family artifacts, chronicling not just the places visited, but also the changing faces and fashions of the family over the successive years of road trip adventures. The cross-country road trip as experienced in 1962 was, therefore, a distinct cultural phenomenon, profoundly shaped by the prevailing automotive technology, the developing but incomplete highway infrastructure, and the social norms and communication limitations of its time. It was a journey that unequivocally demanded more from its participants in terms of meticulous planning, active navigation, mechanical sympathy, and personal resilience than its modern, digitally assisted counterpart. Yet it also offered a different, perhaps deeper, kind of reward. a slower, more immersive, and less filtered engagement with the diverse landscapes, regional cultures, and local communities of America. A greater cultivation of self-reliance and familial cooperation, and a trove of unique, hard-won shared family memories forged in the crucible of the open road, long before the digital age redrew the map of travel and transformed the nature of the journey itself. The horizon encountered then was not merely a destination pre-plotted on a glowing screen, but a tangible, often distant, goal achieved through considerable perseverance, careful observation, and an indomitable spirit of exploration that came to define a generation of American travelers and their passage through the heart of the nation. And the stories born from those extensive journeys, replete with their breakdowns, their discoveries, their detours, and their diners, became an integral part of family lore, passed down through generations. A warm and nostalgic echo of a very different time on the American road, a time when the journey was, in every sense, the destination.